Hi, this is Ramya Ravindran and welcome back to my channel Infinity for UPSC. So today we'll be covering the 10th chapter, that is New Empires and Kingdoms. In the 9th chapter we had seen some of the post-Mauryan kingdoms. So in 10th chapter we'll be seeing some more kingdoms. Now this is the timeline that we had seen. You can pause this slide and revise it once again. I have covered it several times. That's why I'm not reading it once again. You can pause it and read it on your own. Now in the previous chapter we had seen these three post-Mauryan kingdoms. In the south, Chola, Chera and Pandya, and they ruled between 2200 and 1800 years ago, which means 200 BC to 200 AD. And here we did not learn about any specific king, but we have learned about Mohendas in general. Then coming to Western India, we had learnt about Satavahanas. This kingdom was established about 2100 years ago, which means 100 BC to 300 AD, because they ruled for 400 years. And here we have learnt about Gautami Putra Sri Satakarni. So this king belonged to Satavahana kingdom. Then we saw about the Kushana Empire, and this empire existed in the northwestern part of India. And this was established about 2000 years ago. And here we saw about one specific ruler. He was called as Kanishk, who ruled about 1900 years ago. So all these were the kingdoms which we had seen in the previous chapter. Chola, Chera, Pandya ruled between 2200 and 1800 years ago. Then Satavahanas in the west and in some parts of central India established about 2100 years ago and lasted for about 400 years. Then Kushana kingdom established about 2000 years ago in northwest India, and the most important fact about Kushanas is that these were the earliest rulers to issue gold coins. Very important fact about Kushanas, earliest rulers to issue gold coins. Now in this chapter we are going to see about Gupta period and Harshavardhana, Chalukyas and Pallavas and Rashtrakutas. So this is 300 AD Gupta period, Harshavardhana 600 AD and Chalukyas and Pallavas 500 AD and Rashtrakutas 750 AD. You don't have to remember the exact dates, just remember the approximate date. Now these two are in the north, Gupta and Harshavardhan north. This is northwest and north. Chalukyas and Pallavas and Rashtrakutas, these two are in the south. Now here you have to note one thing, that the Deccan region is also considered as south. So these two in the north and these two in the south. Now do we already know anything about these four kingdoms? Try to recollect. Yes, we have read about Gupta period. What was that? The last of the Shakas were defeated by the Gupta kings. In this chapter we are going to see which Gupta king defeated the last of the Shakas. But as of now, we know that it was the Gupta king who defeated the last of the Shakas. Then about Pallavas and Chalukyas, we know that these two kingdoms were established about 1500 years ago. So these two facts are already known to us. Now we will begin this chapter with the Gupta kingdom. And among the Guptas, we will learn about Samudragupta first. And we get to know about Samudragupta from a long inscription inscribed on the Ashokan pillar at Allahabad. Very important statement, we get to know about Samudragupta through a long inscription which was inscribed at Allahabad, and this inscription belonged to Ashoka. So Samudragupta, Ashokan pillar at Allahabad. Now this inscription, it was composed by Harisen, and Harisen was a poet and minister at the court of Samudragupta. So here you should associate Harisen with Samudragupta. Now this inscription, this is called as Prashasti. It is a special kind of inscription because this is just praising the king. And Prashasti, it is a Sanskrit word which means in praise of. So that means we will just get to see good things about Samudragupta mentioned in this inscription. While Prashastis were composed for some of the rulers of post-Mauryan period such as Gautami Putra Sri Satakarni, they became far more important from the time of Guptas. So we have already seen that an inscription was composed for Gautami Putra Sri Satakarni, and we get to know about him through an inscription which was composed on behalf of his mother Gautami Balashri. So this was already seen and we already know this fact. Now most important thing about Satavahanas is that they were called as the lords of Dakshinapath. So very important statement, Satavahanas, lords of Dakshinapath. So here what are they saying? Here they are saying that Prashasti is not something which is new to Guptas. Prashastis were already composed, and one such example is Gautami Putra Sri Satakarni, who belonged to the Satavahanas. But these kind of Prashastis, they became more important from the time of Guptas. So very important statement, if you get this statement in your MCQ, that the system of Prashasti began since the time of Guptas, it is a wrong statement. It became important from the time of Guptas, but these kind of Prashastis were already composed for some of the rulers of post-Mauryan period. And I have already mentioned to you that it was because of these Prashastis that history started getting distorted. Samudragupta's Prashasti. In Samudragupta's Prashasti, the poet praised the king in glowing terms as a warrior, as a king who won victories in battle, who was learned, who was best of poets, and he is also described as equal to God. So all these things you have to remember: as a warrior, a king who won several victories, who was educated, who was best of poets, and equal to gods. Now this is very important statement, because in the medieval India we will see many of the kings who have assigned them this title. That is, they claim that they have been given this authority to rule over people by God. But this kind of thing did not exist earlier. But here we get to see that Samudragupta claimed that he is equal to God, or Harisen claimed that he is equal to God. So this is something very rare in ancient India. Now the Prashasti which we find in Allahabad, it was composed in a very long statement, and a small portion of that sentence is given here. Samudragupta, the warrior, whose body was most charming. Now why is he calling that his body is very charming? Because the body is covered with hundreds of scars, and he got all these scars while fighting the battles, and here he has described all kind of weapons because of which he has got these scars. Then apart from describing Samudragupta, the Prashasti also gives us information about 4 different kinds of rulers, and these rulers, they existed in 4 different regions. And what were the policies that Samudragupta adopted towards these 4 kinds of rulers? And this map that you see, it is based on the information which was provided in the Harisen's Prashasti. Now you are aware of this map because I have already shown you this map in the previous chapter, because there I wanted to show you Cholas, Cheras, Pandyas and Pallavas and Chalukyas. So I wanted to show you the regions which each of these kings ruled. So that is the reason I had used this map in the previous chapter itself. But this map actually gives us information about Samudragupta's policies. So what are the 4 different kinds of rulers? First is the rulers of Aryavarta. There were 9 rulers in the Aryavarta, and all these 9 rulers were uprooted and their kingdoms were made part of Samudragupta's empire. So this green region that you see, this is the Aryavarta, and the 9 rulers who ruled this region, all of them were uprooted. Now what is the second policy? The second policy was adopted towards the 12 rulers in the Dakshinapath. And Dakshinapath, you are aware of this term. The rulers of Satavahanas, they were called as Dakshinapath. And the red dots that you see in this map, these are the capitals of the rulers of Dakshinapath. So Dakshinapath, they ruled western India, some parts of central India, and they had their capitals in eastern coast of India. So note all these points. Now here what was the policy? They surrendered to Samudragupta after being defeated. He allowed them to rule again. That means Samudragupta allowed the rulers of Dakshinapath to rule again. So he had given their kingdoms back to them and they were allowed to rule once again. So entirely 2 different kinds of policies are adopted in these 2 cases. Aryavarta uprooted completely and their kingdoms were made part of Samudragupta's empire. Here the kingdoms were given back to them and they were allowed to rule once again. Then third policy was adopted towards the inner circle. What is the inner circle? This one, the pink color that you see, this is the inner circle. So entire northeast region and extending towards northwest. So from northwest to northeast, this is called as inner state. So it includes Assam, Bengal, Nepal and a number of Gansanghas in the northwest. Now have we seen this term earlier? Yes, we had seen this term earlier and we know that both Buddha and Mahavira belong to such Ganasanghas. So Buddha and Mahavira, they belong to such Ganasanghas. This is already known to us. So what was the policy that was adopted here? The rulers of inner circle, they brought tribute, followed his orders and and attended his court. That means they agreed that they are inferior to Samudragupta. Then the fourth type of policy was adopted towards the outlying areas. So which areas belong to the outlying areas? This blue thing that you see, these are the outlying areas. So extreme northwest and Sri Lanka. And this region that you see, this region was probably ruled by the descendants of Kushanas and Shakas. We had already revised about Kushanas. This kingdom was established about 2000 years ago and they ruled the northwest part of India. Now what do you remember about Shakas? Shakas, they were the Central Asian people and they had set up kingdoms in northwest, north and western India. And these Shakas, they were followed by Kushanas. And the last of the Shakas, they were defeated by Guptas. So whenever you see a name, a kingdom, a king, you need to go back and revise every fact that you know about that person or that kingdom. So this is how you are going to learn history or any other subject that I am going to cover. So the rulers of outlying areas, they submitted to him and they offered their daughters in marriage to Samudragupta. So that means even these rulers accepted that they are subordinate to Samudragupta like the kings of inner circles, but here they offered their daughters as well in marriage to Samudragupta. So four types of kingdoms are Aryavart, Dakshinapad, inner state, outer state. Here, total uprooting and made part of Samudragupta's empire. They allowed them to rule again here in case of Dakshinapad. Then these two type of kingdoms, they accepted that they are subordinate to Samudragupta. In case of inner circle, they brought tribute, they followed the orders and they attended his court. In case of outer circle, they offered their daughters in marriage to Samudragupta. So these are the four kingdoms and the four type of policies that were adopted by Samudragupta. So that means directly or indirectly, the rule of Samudragupta extended from this eastern coast up to the extreme northwestern part of subcontinent. So this is the extent of the rule of Samudragupta. And out of this large extent of empire, there were three important centers of Gupta rulers. Those are Prayag, Ujjain and Patliputra. So this is Prayag, Ujjain and Patliputra. Now when we see the important centers of Gupta rulers, we should go back and see the important centers of different rulers and different kingdoms. So till now we have seen important centers of Mohendas, Kushanas and Guptas. So Mohendas, they had 6 cities. That is, each of these kings, they had 2 cities, one inland and one on the coast. Now out of these 6 cities, 2 were very important. One is Puhar or Kaveri Patnam and this is the port of Cholas. Second is Madurai and that is the capital of Pandyas. Kushanas, they had 2 important centers, Peshawar, Mathura. Peshawar and Mathura are the important centers of Kushanas and they also had Takshila in their kingdom. Then today we saw the important centers of Guptas, Prayag, Ujjain and Patliputra. So this is how you should revise each and every fact. Next is genealogy. Genealogy in the sense family tree. Most Prashastis also mention the ancestors of rulers. One particular Prashasti mentions Samudragupta's great-grandfather, grandfather and father and mother. His mother Kumari Devi belonged to the Licchavi Gana, while his father Chandragupta, he was the first ruler of Gupta dynasty to adopt the grand title of Maharajadi Raja, a title which Samudragupta also used. Now all these information we get through some other Prashasti. This is not the Prashasti which was described by Harisen. This is a different one. So here we get to know about the genealogy and the fact that Chandragupta, that is Samudragupta's father, and Samudragupta, these two rulers, they had adopted the grand title of Maharajadi Raja. Now here in this statement we get to know that Samudragupta's mother belonged to Licchavi Gana. Now we had learnt about this Gana earlier. Where was that? We had seen that Vardhaman Mahavira was a Kshatriya prince of the Licchavis, a group that was part of Vajji Sangh. So Vardhaman Mahavira, he was the prince of Licchavis, and now we see that Samudragupta's mother also belonged to this place, that is Licchavis. Then we had seen that Samudragupta also had Gana Sanghas under his control. Vardhaman Mahavira, he was part of Vajji Sangha, and Buddha, he belonged to Sakhya Gana. Then Samudragupta's great grandfather and grandfather, they were simply mentioned as Maharajas. But his father and he himself, they adopted this title called as Maharaja the Raja. So this says that the family gradually rose to importance, and that is the reason they are adopting such grand titles. Samudragupta in turn figures in the genealogies of later rulers of dynasty such as his son Chandragupta II. So Chandragupta I is the father of Samudragupta and Chandragupta II is his son. So Chandragupta I, Samudragupta and Chandragupta II. This is the order. The king who played the Veena. So through these coins we get to know that Samudragupta used to play Veena, and this has been depicted on the coins. Very important statement, Samudragupta played Veena depicted on the coins. Then we get to know about Chandragupta II through inscriptions and coins. And through such inscriptions and coins, we get to know that Chandragupta II had led an expedition to Western India, where he overcame the last of the Shakas. So now we know that it was Chandragupta II of Gupta dynasty who overcame the last of the Shakas. So very important statement, it was Chandragupta II who overcame the last of the Shakas. According to later belief, his court was full of learned people because the Navratnas belonged to the court of Chandragupta II. So Navratnas and Chandragupta II. It is not mentioned in this chapter, but since it is mentioned that his court was full of learned people, I am telling you that it was Navratnas who belonged to Chandragupta II's court. Next is Vikram Samvat. Now this is a calendar which belongs to Chandragupta II, and this calendar begins from 58 BCE, that is 58 BC. And he had founded this calendar as a mark of victory over the Shakas, and he assumed the title of Vikramaditya. So Vikram Samvat, Chandragupta II, Vikramaditya title, Chandragupta II, and he was a ruler who overcame the last of the Shakas. So all these details are very important. So Chandragupta II becomes very important. Next is Harshavardhana and Harshacharitra. So we are done with Gupta dynasty. Now we are moving on to Harshavardhana. While we can learn about Gupta rulers from the inscriptions and coins, we have seen that we got most of the details from inscriptions and coins. We can find out about some kings from biographies. So Harshavardhana, who ruled nearly 1400 years ago, was one such ruler. That means we get his information from his biography. And who had composed his biography? It was composed by Banabhatta, who was his court poet, and it was composed in Sanskrit. And this book is called as Harshacharitra. And Harshacharitra, it gives us information regarding the genealogy of Harsha, and it ends with he becoming king. So all these informations are important. Harshavardhana, his court poet, Banabhatta, Harshacharitra is the name of the biography, and it is written in Sanskrit. It gives us information regarding the genealogy of Harsha and ends with he becoming king. Now here we need to go back and revise all the court poets and the kings. So Ashwagosha, he was the court poet of Kanishk, and he has written the biography of Buddha. Please note, he has written the biography of Buddha and not Kanishk, but he lived in the court of Kanishka. So Ashwagosha and Kanishk. Then we had seen that Harisen, he was the court poet of Samudragupta, and he is the one who had composed the long inscription on the Ashokan pillar at Allahabad. So Harisen, Samudragupta. Then now we saw that Banabhatta, he is the court poet of Harshavardhana, and he has written the biography of Harshavardhana called as Harshacharitra in Sanskrit. So Ashwagosha, Kanishk, Harisen, Samudragupta, Banabhatta, Harshavardhana. Then Hyunzang has also left a detailed account of what he saw in the kingdom of Harshavardhana. So Hyunzang, he had spent a lot of time at Harsha's court. Very important statement, Hyunzang had visited Harsha's court. He has stayed in his court and he has left a detailed account of what he saw. Now we need to go back and revise about these Chinese pilgrims and their association with rulers. So the order of the arrival of Chinese pilgrims is Fayan first, then Hyunzang, then I King. Hyunzang, he took the land route while going back to China. He carried back statues of Buddha made of gold, silver and sandalwood and over 600 manuscripts, but he lost 50 manuscripts. Then he spent time studying at Nalanda and has described life at Nalanda. Then he has also spent a lot of time at Harsha's court and he has left a detailed account of what he saw. Then about Fayan, he went back via sea route. He was caught in a storm, but he did not lose any of the books or statues of Buddha. So note that Hyunzang, he had spent time at Nalanda and also at Harsha's court. Then Harsha was not the eldest son of his father, but he became king of Thanesar because his father and his elder brother, both of them died. So Harsha, king of Thanesar. Then his brother-in-law, who was the ruler of Kannauj, he was killed by the ruler of Bengal. So Harsha's brother-in-law was killed by the ruler of Bengal. So what did he do? He had to take over Kannauj after the death of his brother, and he also led an army against the ruler of Bengal. Although he was successful in the east and conquered Magad and probably Bengal also, but he was not successful elsewhere. So Harshavardhana, he had conquered Magad and probably Bengal. That means he was successful in the eastern part of India, but he was not successful elsewhere. So why are they saying this? Because Harshavardhana, he tried to cross Narmada and march into Deccan, but he was stopped by a ruler belonging to the Chalukya dynasty called Pulakeshin II. So we know that Chalukya dynasty, this belongs to southern part, and Deccan part also falls under southern part of India. So Pulakeshin II of Chalukya dynasty stopped the march of Harshavardhana into the Deccan region. So you need to understand that Harshavardhana and Pulakeshin II, these two rulers were contemporaries of each other. Such questions are frequently asked in your MCQs. So you need to understand which rulers ruled together and which rulers had fought against each other. And Pulakeshin II, he belongs to Chalukya dynasty. Very important statement. Pulakeshin II, he belongs to Chalukya dynasty. Banabhatta about king's army. So Banabhatta, he was the court poet of Harshavardhana. Here he has mentioned about the journey of king's army and what happens when the king's army passes through different villages. So he has mentioned that the king travelled with an enormous amount of equipment like the things of daily use, furniture, golden footstools, food, and all these things were carried on carts and on animals such as camels and elephants. And this huge army was accompanied by musicians beating drums and others playing horns and trumpets, so that the villagers get to know that the king's army is arriving and they can provide hospitality to them. So these villagers, they are expected to bring gifts, and they bring gifts of curds, good, flowers and fodder for animals. And these villagers, when they get to know that the king's army is passing through their village, they try to meet the king and place complaints and petitions before him. Then further, Banabhatta describes that the army left a trail of destruction behind. The elephants often trampled down the huts of villagers, and the oxen in the villages, they were scared by all these things. And Banabhatta says that the whole world was swallowed up in dust. So this is how he describes the king's army when the army is passing through the villages. Next is Pallavas and Chalukyas. These two were the most important ruling dynasties in South India during this period. We know that the Deccan region is also considered as part of South India. The kingdom of Pallavas spread from the region around their capital Kanchipuram to Kaveri Delta. So the capital of Pallavas is Kanchipuram. Remember this, the capital of Pallavas, Kanchipuram. Then the kingdom of Chalukyas, it was centered around the Raichur Doab. Now Doab means rivers, two rivers. Ab is river and Do is two. So between two rivers, that is the meaning of Doab. Now the two rivers are Krishna and Tungabhadra. So the kingdom of Chalukyas, it was situated between these two rivers, Krishna and Tungabhadra. And this place Raichur, it is in Karnataka. So the place is in Karnataka. Then the capital of Chalukyas is Aihole, which was also an important trading center and a religious center. So Aihole, capital of Chalukyas, plus important trading center plus important religious center. So remember all the points associated with every place. The Pallavas and Chalukyas frequently raided one another's lands, especially attacking the capital cities, which were prosperous towns. Obviously, when two kingdoms are contemporaries of each other and when they are located next to each other, they will attack each other. So that was happening with the case of Pallavas and Chalukyas. Now we will see where these kingdoms are located in the map. So kingdom of Pallavas between their capital Kanchipuram to Kaveri. So this is Kanchipuram and this is the river Kaveri. So this was the kingdom of Pallavas. Then the kingdom of Chalukyas, it is situated between the river Krishna, this is river Krishna and this is river Tungabhadra. So this is the kingdom of Chalukyas and this is the capital of Chalukyas, which is called Aihole. So Aihole, capital of Chalukyas, Kanchipuram, capital of Pallavas. This is west coast and this is east coast. So Chalukya, west coast, Pallava, east coast. Now we will learn about a Chalukyan ruler called as Pulakeshin II. Have we seen this name earlier? Yes, we had seen this name earlier. We saw that when Harshavardhana tried to cross the Narmada river and attack the South Indian land, it was Pulakeshin II of Chalukyan Empire who stopped Harshavardhana. So that was Pulakeshin II and now we are going to learn about Pulakeshin II in detail. The best known Chalukyan ruler was Pulakeshin II and we know about him from a Prashasti composed by his court poet Ravi Kirti. So another king and another court poet, Pulakeshin II and Ravi Kirti. So remember these two names, Pulakeshin II and his court poet Ravi Kirti. Now the Prashasti which has been composed by Ravi Kirti gives us information about the genealogy. That is, it gives us information about the 4 generations from father to son. And according to this Prashasti, we get to know that Pulakeshin got the kingdom from his uncle and not from his father. So all this information we obtain through the Prashasti which has been composed by Ravi Kirti. Now here we need to go back and revise all the kings and their respective court poets. So Ashwaghosha lived in Kanishka's court, Harisen, Samudragupta, Bhanabhatta, Harshavardhana and Ravi Kirti, Pulakeshin II. Then according to Ravi Kirti, Pulakeshin II has led expeditions along west coast and along east coast. And he has also checked the advances of Harsha. We know this, we had already seen this. Now regarding this event, Ravi Kirti writes that after this event, Harsha was no longer Harsha. That is, Harsha was no longer happy. We know that Harsha means happiness. So he is making fun of Harsha, saying that after this defeat, Harsha was no longer Harsha. Then apart from attacking all these kingdoms, he also attacked the Pallava king who took shelter behind the walls of Kanchipuram. So Pulakeshin, who belongs to Chalukyan Empire, has attacked the Pallava king and this Pallava king was hiding behind the walls of Kanchipuram. And Kanchipuram, this is the capital of Pallavas. But Chalukyan victory was short-lived. That means he could not succeed for a long time. Why? Because they had to give way to new rulers belonging to Rashtrakutas and Chola dynasties. So another new Chola dynasty came into picture and they occupied these regions. So after Pallavas and Chalukyas, we have Rashtrakutas and Chola dynasties. So that was regarding all the dynasties. We had seen about Gupta dynasty, about Harshavardhana and about Chalukyas and Pallavas. Now we are going to see some details which are common to all these dynasties. So how were these kingdoms administered? That is Guptas, Harshavardhanas, Chalukyas and Pallavas. The most important requirement for administering the kingdom was obviously land revenue. And the basic unit of administration was village. That is, the smallest possible area which was controlled was village, and from there on it became larger and larger. And these were the systems which were followed even by the earlier kings. So nothing new was adopted in this case. But there was something new which was happening with these kingdoms. That is, these kingdoms were having powerful people. These people were powerful either economically, socially, politically or military strength wise. and the kingdoms and the kings, they try to take their support, that is win their support and have their support in ruling the kingdom. And to keep these powerful people and important people happy, the kings adopted several ways. So these are the ways which they adopted. So the first one is administrative posts were made hereditary. That means the post would be transferred from father to son. Example, the poet Harisen. So this poet belongs to whose court? He was in the court of Samudragupta. So Harisen, he was a Mahadanda Nayaka like his father. That means he got this post because of the system of hereditary. His father was Mahadanda Nayaka, and that is the reason he was also made Mahadanda Nayaka. Now here you need to note that Mahadanda Nayaka means Chief Judicial Officer. So such questions are frequently asked. You will be given a term and the corresponding English term would be given, and you need to match those two terms. So Mahadanda Nayaka is Chief Judicial Officer. Danda means punishment. So you should be able to guess that Mahadanda Nayaka is Chief Judicial Officer. Then second thing is, sometimes one person held many offices. That means a person would be given more than one post. Example, apart from being Mahadanda Nayaka, Harisen was also a Kumar Amatya and a Sandhi Vigrahika. So Kumar Amatya, it means important minister, and Sandhi Vigrahika means minister of war and peace. We know that Sandhi means compromise, and compromise is made between two opposing teams with opposing opinions. So Sandhi Vigrahika means Minister of War and Peace. So this is how you should remember. Mahadanda Nayaka, Chief Judicial Officer; Kumar Amatya, Important Minister; Sandhi Vigrahika, Minister of War and Peace. And all these posts were occupied by Harisen, who was the court poet of Samudragupta. Then the third step was giving important men some say in local administration. That is, these important men, they could give their opinion, and their opinion was considered by the kings and by the kingdoms. So who were these important people? Nagara Shreshti, Sarthavaha, Prathama Kulika and Kayasth. So you need to remember all these terms and the corresponding English term. So Nagara Shreshti, it means chief banker or merchant. Then Sarthavaha means leader of the merchant caravans. We are aware of the term called as Sarathi, and Sarathi is the person who rides the caravan. So Sarthavaha means leader of the merchant caravan. Prathama Kulika. Prathama means first or chief. So chief craftsman. Kayasth means scribe. We know that Kulika and Kayasth, both these are associated with hand, because craftsperson, they make artifacts with hands, and these people, they write. So these were the steps which were adopted by the kings. First is making the post hereditary. Second is giving more than one post. And third is these people having some sort of say in local administration. So all these policies which were adopted by the king, these were effective. But sooner or later, some of these powerful men, they grew strong enough to set up independent kingdoms. That is, when these people became more powerful and when the king became weak, these people tried to overthrow the king and occupy the kingdom. Or in other case, they tried to set up their independent kingdom. A new kind of army. We saw that all these kingdoms had some of the other new steps which were adopted to administer the kingdom. Now with respect to army also, they had some new kind of system which they followed. So what is the new system? Like earlier rulers, some of these kings maintained a well-organized army with elephants, chariots, cavalry and foot soldiers. What is a cavalry? The soldier who rides on top of the horse and fights the battle. So that is cavalry, and this is foot soldier. So both are soldiers and both are fighting the battle, but this is on foot and this is on horse. Besides, there were military leaders who provided the king with troops whenever he needed them. So this is a new thing that we see within these kingdoms. That is the system of having military leaders. That means the king is not maintaining the army. Instead, a person called as military leader, he is maintaining the army. And whenever the king needs army, he will borrow army from these military leaders. Then these military leaders, they were not paid regular salaries. Instead, some of them received grants of land. That means the king is giving them land and not money. Now this is making the military leader very powerful, because first of all he has got his own army and the king doesn't have his own army. That means the king is dependent on military leader for the army. This is one thing. Second thing is, now the king has given land to military leader. That means the military leader has got his own land and he can use this land to collect revenue. So indirectly he has become the king of this land through which he is collecting revenue. So this is making him more powerful than the king. And some of the other day he will try to overthrow the king himself. So this was a mistake which was done by these dynasties, that is making the military leaders very powerful. These military leaders, they were known as Samants. So military leader Samant. Another term, military leader Samant. Whenever the ruler was weak, Samants tried to become independent. I have already told you that if these people are made very powerful and if the king becomes weak, these people will try to overthrow the king himself. Assemblies in the southern kingdom. Now we have the system called as assemblies which do not exist in the northern part but which exist in the southern part of the subcontinent. And we get to know about these assemblies through the inscriptions of Pallavas. So the inscriptions of Pallavas mention a number of local assemblies such as Sabha, Ur and Nagaram. So what is the difference between all three? Sabha, it was an assembly of Brahmin landowners. Ur, it was a village assembly found in areas where the landowners were not Brahmins. So here assembly of Brahmin landowners, and this was found in the villages where the landowners were not Brahmins. Then Nagaram, it was an organization of merchants. So Sabha, Ur and Nagaram. And this Sabha, this assembly functioned through subcommittees which looked after irrigation, agricultural operations, making roads, local temples, etc. So that means these assemblies played a major role in administration of the kingdoms. And these assemblies were controlled by rich and powerful landowners and merchants. So rich and powerful people controlled these assemblies. And many of these local assemblies, it continued to function for centuries. So take a note of all the keywords: inscription of Pallavas, Sabha, assembly of Brahmin landowners, Ur, landowners were not Brahmins, Nagaram, organization of merchants controlled by rich and powerful and continued to exist for centuries. Next is ordinary people in the kingdom. So how do we get to know about the ordinary people who existed in these kingdoms? We can catch a glimpse of the lives of ordinary people from plays and other accounts. Example, Kalidasa is known for his plays depicting life in the king's court. So we get to know about the ordinary people through the plays of Kalidasa. And one interesting feature about these plays is that the king and most Brahmins are shown as speaking Sanskrit, while women and men other than the king and Brahmins use Prakrit. So through his plays we get to see the distinction which existed between the king and the other people and which existed between Brahmins and non-Brahmins. And here we also get to see that the women who were living in the king's court, even those women were speaking Prakrit. That means their status and the status of the ordinary people were equal. His most famous play, Abhigyana Shakuntalam, is the story of love between a king named Dushyanta and a young woman named Shakuntala. We find description of the plight of a poor fisherman in this play. So Abhigyana Shakuntalam, it is a play by Kalidasa. It describes the love story between Dushyanta and Shakuntala, and here we get to see the plight of a poor fisherman. So all these things you need to associate with this play. Now in this play, that is Abhigyana Shakuntalam, here we get to know that a fisherman found a precious ring which the king had given to Shakuntala but which had been accidentally swallowed by a fish. Then when this fisherman went to palace with the ring, the gatekeepers, they accused him of theft and the chief police officer was very rude. However, the king was very happy when he saw the ring and he sent a reward for the fisherman. Now when these people, that is the police officer and the gatekeepers, when they got to know that this fisherman has got a reward, they decided to take a share of the reward and they went along with the fisherman to have a drink. So what is it that we get to know through this story? We get to know that corruption existed even during those days, and everybody, that is right from the gatekeeper to the chief police officer, everybody was corrupt. So this is how we get to know about certain aspects of life that existed during those period. Then what has Fa Yan written about untouchables? Now just to help you revise, the other Chinese pilgrim, that is Hyun Zhang, he had mentioned about the Harsha's kingdom and the life in Harsha's court. Now Fa Yan, he is describing about the life of untouchables. The Chinese pilgrim Fa Yan noticed the plight of those who were treated as untouchables by the high and mighty. They were expected to live on the outskirts of the city. That is, these people, these untouchables, they were supposed to live outside the city, and whenever they want to enter a town or a marketplace, they are supposed to strike a piece of wood, so that everybody gets to know that he is entering the town or the marketplace, so that they can avoid touching him or brushing against him. So the only thing that needs to be taken from this slide is Fa Yan, he had mentioned about the life of untouchables. Elsewhere, that is, while the Guptas, Harshavardhana and Chalukyas and Pallavas, when these people were ruling the Indian subcontinent, what was happening elsewhere? So during this time, we got a new religion called as Islam, and this was developed in Arabia. Although Arabia is a desert, it was at the hub of communications for centuries. In fact, Arab merchants and sailors played an important role in the sea trade between India and Europe. We know that these merchants, they were aware of India and they reached the Indian coast, and it was because of them that these Europeans, they got to know about the spices and about the artifacts that existed in India. So the trade between India and Europe took place via these Arab merchants. And we also get to know that many of the inventions, that is the inventions in mathematics, inventions in science and in medicine, all these were made by Indians. But the Europeans at that point of time, they believed that these inventions were made by Arabs, because it reached Arabs first and it reached Europeans via the Arabs. So these Europeans, they believed that these inventions were made by the Arabs. But in fact, those were made by the Indians, which traveled via Arabs. So similarly, these Arabs were the middlemen for trade between India and Europe. Others who lived in Arabia were the Bedouins, and these were the pastoral tribe depending mainly on camels and on hardy animals that could survive in the desert. So very important statement, Bedouins, pastoral tribe, and who lived in Arabia. Around 1400 years ago, Prophet Muhammad introduced a new religion called Islam in Arabia. So Islam was developed about 1400 years ago. Like Christianity, Islam was a religion that laid stress on equality and unity of all before Allah, the one supreme God. Here is a verse from Quran, which is the sacred book of Islam. So Quran, the sacred book of Islam. For Muslim men and women, for believing men and women, for those who are devout, who are true, and who are patient and constant, who are humble, who give charity, who fast, who guard their chastity. Chastity means brahmacharya. And who remember Allah. For them, Allah has prepared forgiveness and great reward. Within 100 years, Islam spread to North Africa, Spain, Iran, and India. Arab sailors who were already familiar with the coastal settlements of the subcontinent, that is, these Arab sailors, they were already familiar with the southern part of the Indian subcontinent, and they had already reached the western coast of Indian subcontinent for trade. But this time, they brought this new religion with them when they came to Indian subcontinent. Arab soldiers conquered Sindh about 1300 years ago, that is 100 years after Islam was developed. And this Sindh, it is in present day Pakistan, but during those days it was an Indian subcontinent. So here you need to know that it was spread to North Africa, Spain, Iran and India first, that is within the 100 years of the development of this religion. So North Africa, Spain, Iran and India. Now here I am not showing the map because Arabia during those days meant the entire West Asia. But now we have got several countries in the West Asia and I'll be dealing with all those countries, but that will be dealt in the map series. Because here if I take all those countries, the chapter will be very lengthy. So I'm dealing with all those countries in a different series and I'll be posting the links to all those videos below this video. Some important dates. Beginning of Gupta dynasty 1700 years ago. We had already seen in the timeline that Gupta period was established about 300 AD. So that means 1700 years ago. Rule of Harshavardhana 1400 years ago. We had seen that it was established about 600 AD. So 600 AD means 1400 years ago. Then we also know that Chalukyas and Pallavas were established about 1500 years ago, that is 500 AD. So we are done with this chapter. I'll quickly revise this chapter once again because the previous chapter had become very lengthy due to the revision part. So this time I'll be just scrolling through the slides. So this is the timeline of the kingdoms that we had seen in the previous chapter and the ones which we saw in this chapter. Samudragupta inscription on Ashokan pillar at Allahabad, court poet Hari Sen. Then his Prashasti says that he had won lot of battles, he was learned, best of poets and equal to God. Then Samudragupta's Prashasti also mentions 4 different kind of rulers and different policies towards them. Aryavarta, Dakshinapad, inner state, outer state. Then 3 important centers of Gupta rulers were Prayag, Ujjain and Patliputra. Then important centers of different kingdoms, Puhar or Kaveri Patnam, port of Cholas, Madurai, capital of Pandyas. Kushanas, Peshawar and Mathurai and Takshila also belong to them. Then we get to know that Samudragupta's father Chandragupta I and Samudragupta both adopted Maharajadi Raja. His mother belonged to Lichavi Gana and others they simply adopted the title of Maharajas. Vardhaman Mahavira, he was a Kshatriya prince of Lichavis and he belonged to Vajji Sangh. Buddha, he belonged to Sakhyagana. Samudragupta, he was a king who played Veena and we get to know this information through coins. Chandragupta too, we get to know about him through inscriptions and coins, led expedition, overcame the last of the Shakas, his court was full of learned people, that is Navratnas, and Vikram Samvat is associated with Chandragupta too, he adopted the title of Vikramaditya. Harshavardhana, we get to know about him through biography composed by Banabhatta and Hyun Zhang has described about Harsha's court. The order of arrival of Chinese pilgrims is Fayan first, Hyun Zhang, then I King. Hyun Zhang went back via land route, Fayan went back via sea route. Then Hyun Zhang, he has studied at Nalanda and has spent time at Harsha's court and he has described life at Nalanda and also has given account about Harsha's court. Harshavardhana, not the eldest son but became king of Thanesa because father and elder brother died. Then he also took over the kingdom of Kannauj because his brother-in-law was killed. Then he was successful in the eastern part of India but not elsewhere because he was stopped by Pulakeshin II when he tried to cross Narmada and reach into Deccan region. Then Banabhatta, he describes about king's army. Then Pallavas and Chalukyas, they ruled the southern part of India 1500 years ago, that is 500 AD. The kingdom of Pallavas extended from Kanchipuram to Kaveri Delta, Chalukyas from Krishna to Tungabhadra, that is the Raichur Doab. I hold the capital of Chalukyas. Then the best Chalukyan ruler was Pulakeshin II, his court poet Ravi Kirti. Then he has checked the advance of Harsha. He attacked the Pallava king, but finally they had to give way to Rashtrakutas and the Chola dynasties. Then the rulers and biographers Ashwaghosha, Kanishk, Hari Sen, Samudragupta, Banabhatta, Harshavardhana and Ravi Kirti, Pulakeshin II. Then all these kingdoms, that is Guptas, Harshavardhanas, Pallavas and Chalukyas, they were dependent on the land revenue for administration and they had adopted certain new techniques like making the administrative post hereditary. Hari Sen, he was Mahadandanayaka or chief judicial officer and he was also the Kumar Amatya, that is important minister, Sandhi Vigrahika, that is minister of war and peace. Then important men had say in the administration of the kingdom. Nagara Sreshti, chief banker or merchant, Sartavaha, that is leader of merchant caravans, Prathama Kulika, chief craftsman, Kayasth, scribe. A new kind of army. We see a system called as military leaders, that is Samans. These people were not given regular salaries but they were given grants of land. Assemblies in southern kingdom, we get this information through the inscription of Pallavas, Sabha, Ur, Nagaram. Sabha is assembly of Brahmin landowners, assembly where the landowners were not Brahmins, that is Ur, Nagaram, organization of merchants. Then we get to know about ordinary people through plays. Example, Kalidasa's plays. And here we see that king and Brahmins, they speak Sanskrit, but women and other men, they speak Prakrit. Then Abhigyana Shakuntalam, which is a play by Kalidasa, it describes the love story of Dushyant and Shakuntala. And here we get to see the plight of a poor fisherman. And here we also get to see that corruption existed even during those days. Then Fahian, he has mentioned about untouchables. Then elsewhere, 1400 years ago, Prophet Muhammad introduced a new religion called Islam in Arabia. And here we see the term Bedouins, pastoral people depending mainly on camels who lived in Arabia. Very important. Then within 100 years, Islam spread to North Africa, Spain, Iran and India, and within 100 years, they had conquered Sindh. Then important dates, Gupta dynasty 1700 years ago, that is 300 AD, Harshavardhana 1400 years ago, 600 AD, Chalukyas and Pallavas 1500 years ago, that is 500 AD. So we are done with this chapter. Please like, share and subscribe this channel, and I'll be back with the next video very soon. Thank you so much.